I had this one that I saw from Quazii, which is a reaction. Final Fantasy XIV MSQ blown out of proportion. No spoiler. Okay, let's jump into this and see what Quazii has to say. Before we begin, though, let me link the video. Boop, boop, boop. Put it playing in the background, mute the tab or something like that. Let's give it some watch time, and I will pre-like the video, and let's get this show on the road.
Hey folks, today I'd like to talk about what you see on screen here. It's actually one of the most commented topics on the 14 discussion Reddit that I've seen in a long while, and I'll put a link to this thread in the description below. Essentially, OP positions the question as, do you feel like the Final Fantasy XIV story is blown way out of proportion? The important bits are essentially what's highlighted. To be clear, I think what OP is trying to say is that—
Let me see here. Not the best story I've experienced in gaming by a long shot. There's a lot of failed emotional moments, boring scenes that just really drag out story arcs. Despite the highs being pretty high up there, still think the story is pretty good. I mean, it's going to resonate differently with different people, which is why I said that for me, it is the best story I've ever experienced in any form of media. Doesn't mean that's going to be the same for everyone, though.
this is definitely not the best story that someone has experienced in a video game, and that there's a lot of failed emotional moments, boring scenes, and dragged out story arcs. However, OP does conclude that the story is still pretty good. It's just not as crazy good as what people make it out to be. Or to paraphrase it, it's that maybe 14 story is overrated, and I always wanted to make a video about this ever since I published a review on the Endwalker MSQs when I finally finished it. And I remember in the video there's a lot of debate in the comment section regarding, was Endwalker's MSQs really that good? Was it better than Shadowbringers? And there was definitely mixed opinions. And this video is very timely because we are almost at the 1 year mark of the
I think that this is actually a good thing when people are debating, well, which one was the better story? Was it Heaven's Word? Was it Shadowbringers? Was it Endwalker? Which one's the best one? And I think that's an interesting, it's an interesting thing to have happen, because it basically means everybody loved at least those three stories so much that there's discussion about which one is actually the best. Whereas, for instance, if you look at something like World of Warcraft, like most people will just be like, well, Wrath of the Lich King, clearly, because fuck all the other expansions, right? It's like, it's pretty cut and dry, which is actually a bad sign in my opinion. So yeah. I noticed you did not mention Stormblood. Yeah, I didn't. I also didn't mention Realm Reborn. But guess what? If I had mentioned Realm Reborn, I'd say it's still better than Stormblood.
release of the Endwalker 6.0 MSQs. So I think it's kind of good to take stock now. To be clear, this video will not have any spoilers. I wouldn't give any concrete story examples. I'll be tackling the issue at a 10,000 feet level. But before we start, if you like my content coverage of Final Fantasy XIV, do subscribe to the channel. That really means the world to me. We're growing this wholesome community one warrior of light at—
Let me see if YouTube has unsubscribed me from Quazii again. Oh no, they didn't. Okay, good to see, YouTube, thanks. Like twice they unsubscribed me from him.
The time to join our happy family. With that said, I think if you look through the thread, and the first main point I'd like to bring up is that the 14 storyline and MSQs isn't amazing to me personally, just simply because of the narrative and the storyline. In a vacuum, the story itself is, as per what OP characterized, is a pretty good story. But that's not the big picture here. And I'll explain that shortly, but think about it. The storyline of Final Fantasy XIV throughout the many years that concluded with Endwalker for the first saga is pretty much, if you go through any form of formal written training regarding like writing essays and expositions, it follows a standard formula, right? You have a main character, or in this case, main characters of the Scions, the Warrior of Light and his merry band of Scions.
Yeah, a big thing about it is that I don't look at the story of Final Fantasy XIV as like, how should I explain it? I don't look at it like a movie or like a book, right? You have to take into account the interactions that you have with each of the characters, which is how you get a reaction out of me. Like, you guys didn't get to see it because I didn't stream it this time around, but like the moment where the thing happens in, I'm being very vague, in Endwalker, where there's a couple of characters that are kind of like separated from you in a bit of a hostile situation, let's put it like that. And there were a lot of innocent bystanders. And my reaction was like, I will fucking butcher every single fucking person in here to get those characters back, and nothing will fucking stop me. I will end the lives of all of these people in here. I do not give a single fuck to get these characters back. Like, that was my instant reaction. I would not care if that would take me down some kind of dark path, if that had an impact in the story. I did not care. I would butcher everybody in there to get those characters back. It was that simple. Yeah. Pretty fucking wild. Those interactions aren't real though. It just doesn't work if I'm in there. Witcher worked because I was just controlling an established character. It's like, I don't know. I guess for some people it works. It works, for some people it doesn't. But like the interactions that you get with the characters in the story of Final Fantasy XIV is what makes everything so important for me, at least. I never get the game has super high highs, but has long, boring, slow parts. Take the point of the slow parts is to usually build up the high points. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You need the slow portions of the story in order to actually get the high highs.
Get you invested by firstly getting you to care about their problems, and then they show you what are some of the obstacles they face, and finally overcoming the obstacles to basically get the emotional payoff. And that's why I say in a vacuum, it's pretty standard. However, I think what makes the MSQ experience to me amazing, nothing like I've experienced in other video games, is that aside from the narrative itself, there are other elements that other video games are not able to replicate. And amongst them is the music. I think if you watch any blockbuster movie, if you watch anything that
music
has
is
moved
also
you in the
really
past,
important.
and if you remove the musical background track, I can pretty much assure
Listen, to give you guys an idea, I can just play this music and it takes me right back. It takes me right back. Listen, for instance, and this is like out of context, most people have no idea what this is. But you play this music and it instantly is going to take a lot of people right back. It takes you right fucking back, dude. Or even this one. Wait. I think it's here. How about this one? Watch. Watch, no, listen, because I'm not going to show it. This takes you right back to all of those moments in the game. Or how about, what's it called? Listen, for the week after I finished Endwalker, during that week, I played that music a couple of times in my car and I would still get tears in my face. No joke.
And guarantee you the feels of the emotions that you're going through will not be as intense. Because like they say, music is kind of like the window into the soul. It is what orchestrates your emotions and tells you what to feel. And in Soken-san, Yoshi P arguably has one of the best musical talent, I guess, in the video gaming history or in this generation. Because look around for other MMOs. You will find other great musical composers, but I will argue none are as versatile as what Soken can do, which is basically he can do jazz, he can do grand epic orchestral music, he can do piano sentimental music, guitar acousticals, and basically the range and repertoire is just insane, right? Let's look at Lahi and his performance using the otome at one of the FanFest. The man is versatile. And then combine that with his use of leitmotifs and whatnot, I would argue the ability to blend in all these musical elements into the story and time it
spoilers
to the
in this trailer though.
You know the feels and emotions is supposed to hit at a certain point, and then the music kicks in. That's an art form. It's not easy to replicate that. And I remember there was an interview done with either Yoshipi or Soken where they actually said that one of the polishing elements for, shipping the final expansion is that they have to basically trim the musical scores to fit the cutscene exactly down to the very second. And why do you think they do that? It's really to ensure that the music kicks in at the exact right moment. The pacing needs to be correct. So that's one element that I think is very unique to 14. And very little video games can kind of replicate that feel. The other very important element that I think people often overlook when they talk about the story is the flow of time. 14's story, if you look at it again, a vacuum in a narrative perspective. If I tell you about the story of the Warrior of Light, everything from A Realm Reborn all the way to Endwalker, you would say, that's a good story. But you might not shed tears about it if I told you the story verbally. And why is that so? It's because if you think about the MSQs that you have played from A Realm Reborn to Endwalker, for many of us, it's something that has played out through many, many, many years. And if you are a veteran, up to a decade.
And this is another one of the things that I say, the importance of taking your time. Like, I remember I took breaks while I was playing through Final Fantasy XIV. I took breaks, and I think that has given me a greater appreciation of the story as opposed to someone who potentially just like plays it beginning to end. Taking breaks and coming back to it. And even then, the impact on me was much lesser than on the players who were playing the game like throughout the expansions as they were relevant, like the people who played Realm Reborn when it was relevant, Heavensward when it was relevant, all of that. Like, there's a different appreciation to all of that, for sure.
Okay, and what
5.3 made me cry like a bitch every time I watch a streamer go through it. And then you cry even harder when you understand that Soken was fighting cancer when he composed the music of that trial. How about that? One of the best tunes in Final Fantasy XIV, composed from a hospital room as the man was fighting for his life. That's right.
Does the flow of time actually lend to storytelling? It basically allows you to build out to the huge emotional payoff after so many years. It's pretty powerful stuff because the problem that they set out in A Realm Reborn, the people that they make you care about, and the problems that they have to tackle, to see that all finally resolve after a long decade, that is some powerful stuff because you had so many years to feel accustomed to the characters, to fall in love with them, and through so many years of different story experiences, the 14 team is also really smart in terms of being able to use callbacks to certain moments, certain key character moments, let's say someone passing away, a pivotal moment in the story to allow you to build towards that grand payoff. And you know what? That's not an easy business decision to make. If you look at the MMORPG industry, expansions generally have their own storylines. However, I would argue that it's not as tied to the previous expansions and the base game itself versus Final Fantasy XIV. While 14's different expansion does have different narrative arcs. From A Realm Reborn to Endwalker, there's a common thread that is basically running through all of them that binds the story together. Other MMORPGs tend to sell their expansions as hop in during this expansion, experience this particular arc and chapter, right? So you cannot play previous expansions and you can still jump in and you wouldn't be clueless. And that honestly is kind of a gutsy business decision. It's not an easy one to make because you know it, I know it. The hardest part of convincing someone to play 14 is basically having them understand that the story is really long and they need to sink in many hours to basically play this game and appreciate the story. So that's the downside of kind of pursuing this strategy. But because they're one of the few who decide that they want to stay firm to this principle of having a long-standing story that they will not rush and slowly build up towards a high crescendo, the highs of the story are the highs that you pretty much have never experienced in a video game before because of the emotional investment that you have made over the many years that you have carried forward as, memories that you draw upon. And I think that is part of the magic formula. Like some of you who played Final Fantasy XIV from the start, I'm sure you have actually transited into different phases of your life, starting a family, starting to work professionally, graduating from college, but you always still come back to the story whenever there's new MSQ arcs to be done, because in your mind, the very highs of the MSQ emotional moments is very deeply ingrained as those kind of milestones that you look back upon on your life and say, I'll never forget that moment. And it's rewarding, it's nostalgic, and that's why a lot of you, I think in the comments below, I often hear things like, I'm currently taking a break from the game, but when the new MSQ release, I'm coming back to play the game. And that is something honestly very unique in the gaming community, in the broader gaming community, beyond MMORPGs, where there's such a sticky fan base that kind of comes back to the game, this revival of players. And it all points to the fact that at a 10,000 feet level, a good narrative combined with, I guess, the genius of musical composition, combined with the ability to build up the huge emotional payoff over many years, is a formula that is very hard to replicate and is something special. And so that's the first main point that I like to make in this video. This is why it feels amazing to me, because
it's an interesting thing that the story, which is something that traditionally MMORPGs don't really pay that much attention to, is a key thing in Final Fantasy XIV in a way that is almost one of the defining characteristics that keeps players coming back. A lot of players come back for the story. Sometimes they stick around for a while and do some of the other content, stuff like that. But I would argue a majority of the players, they do come back for the story, and it just changes the relationship that you have with the game when you really care about the story and you really care about the characters. Because, like, for instance, you go, the instant comparison that I can draw upon is going to be World of Warcraft, right? You think about World of Warcraft, it's like, okay, what thing do I really care that much about the story at this point? And I'm just thinking to myself, I almost wish that you could just like tell me that everything that happened after Wrath of the Lich King was a fucking dream, and we could just go back and start again from the point of Wrath of the Lich King. It's like, I think the only character I would care if they died is probably Brand Bronzebeard. Everybody else can fucking die for all I care. Illidan, he could die. Make a difference to me, whatever. Uther, he's already dead. Who cares? Sylvanas, she could die. Wouldn't Anduin? Don't care. I guess I cared when Varian died, but at least they gave Varian a good death. So, whatever.
It's hard to find something like this. And the second thing I think is worth keeping in mind as we move towards 7.0 and looking towards the future is to keep in mind that technically Yoshi P and team's tools for disposal of storytelling is kind of hampering their progress. What do I mean? We all know that the Final Fantasy XIV engine right now, as we play it, still have remnants of the spaghetti code from 1.0. And a lot of you might say, wait, how are you so sure that there's still remnants of the spaghetti code, limitations and shackles imposed by 1.0? Remember Error 2002 at the launch of Endwalker? One of the explanations given is that there's some infrastructural problems that was left behind by the legacy 1.0 server connection issue. Essentially, they have to make the best use of a shaky foundation in the first place. And that is why if you play other video games versus Final Fantasy XIV, you will know that there's some limitations that the 14 team is facing. What do I mean? I'm sure you've experienced in the MSQs, there are certain parts where maybe, the lighting of the scene isn't as great as the others because there's only limited lighting sources that they can place in the game. And I believe this is one of the things that Yoshi P covered during his 7.0 graphical upgrade producer live letter. He talked about the ability to add more lighting sources. Not only that, have you ever noticed that it seems that all the characters in a cutscene, they need to take their turns to speak? You can't have simultaneous audio flowing in a cutscene. That also to me is a limitation of the engine that they're currently working with. Yoshi P has said on a few occasions that it's really tough to make kind of custom animations with the engine they have. That is why Hildebrand is so expensive to make, because of all these fancy and wacky animations that they have to do. And that is why we also took so many years to finally get a hugging scene all the way in Endwalker, because it's just very hard for them to kind of animate the character models to convey what they want in a cutscene. And I guess that's also why if you look through like the earlier parts of Final Fantasy XIV and the expansions, object physics that they hold in their hand is not exactly realistic either. It's only until Endwalker that they really allow Scions and the Warriors of Light to hold food and basically eat the food and basically have their foods like being bitten on and chunks being taken out. All these are limitations to the storytelling engine that they can use and rely upon. And to me, honestly, it's a bit of a pity, because I really wonder, in a world where all the shackles are removed, what are some of the possibilities that they can actually do for the game and cutscene. And I'm not saying that
Dude, it would be wild. Think of like this team without the shackles of 1.0. Oh my god. It'd be the best game in the world. It would just be the best game in the world. It's like, yeah, that's it.
7.0 graphical upgrades will solve all.
That's called Final Fantasy 15. Catnet, are you crazy? I know, I'm joking. He meant 16, of course.
Of these problems. I'm just trying to point out the fact that even until today, when we play the Endwalker MSQs, they are relying upon an infrastructure from so many years ago. But as gamers, we kind of think about the modern day games today and we try and benchmark Final Fantasy XIV's cutscenes versus what we see in the modern day engine. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not exactly an apples to apples comparison when we talk about the storytelling tools at Yoshi P's disposal. The good news is 7.0 will see a brand new graphical engine overhaul. Well, not overhaul, but a massive improvement. And I think with better lit scenes and basically higher definition textures and whatnot, everything will come, to life in a much better fashion. But I also cannot help but wonder, is this why Yoshi P mentioned in one of the recent interviews that I covered on this channel that, before he eventually leaves the industry, he wants to be able to do another MMORPG of his own? Because I feel like he also...
Bro, give that man all the money. Give that man all the money. All of the money. Okay? And just let him do whatever the fuck he wants. Bro, let's go. Let's fucking go.
Understands there's limitations that he's facing, and he has this grand vision. He wants to craft something from scratch to support his grand vision. This is my guess. But obviously we are talking about many years down the road. And my third main point is regarding those more mundane scenes and I guess those so-called, what OP calls, those failed emotional moments. I think it's important to recognize that in order to build towards a crescendo in a story, you can't have high points at every single moment. Because then it will
you need low points. You need moments where the characters are just like hanging out, which they've done quite a few of in Endwalker. It's quite a few moments where the characters are just hanging out. And that's important for character development. You need the lows to get to the highs. If everything is just like high, it gets to a point where your brain gets desensitized from it. You no longer feel anything because like, well, sure, there's just going to be another big thing happening in like 5 seconds from now. You need contrast, is what it's called. You need a little bit of contrast. Otherwise, you can't appreciate when things are very emotional, very important. You can appreciate that if there aren't moments where they're not.
Qualify the idea that it's a high point, right? It's all relative. If one makes the argument of whether Endwalker's pacing could have been better, I think there was an interview done with Ishikawa, or is it Yoshi-P, who mentioned that they initially intended for Endwalker's story to be split into 2 halves, like 2 different expansions. And so is pacing gonna suffer because of this compression? Maybe. But I think when most people look back on the MSQs, they tend to think back to the highs, the very peak of emotions they experience. And that's why I think while maybe there's room for the pacing to improve, what really matters at the end of the day is the feeling you get away from, doing the MSQs and finishing the expansion. I remember finishing Endwalker MSQs and I was just so exhausted from just being emotionally spent from this very long journey. And I think to consider is that when people talk about 14, they tend to talk about it in the MMORPG space. Like, given the limitations and the structures imposed by an MMORPG that has different classes, that basically requires you to level and whatnot, all things considered, I think you would struggle to find another MMORPG with, like what I said, the different elements of the narrative, the music, the emotional payoff from the many years of emotional investment. It was really hard to find another MMO that basically combines all these 3. And that is why when people talk about 14's MSQ, they tend to talk about it in the structure of MMORPGs. Like, oh, you love MMORPGs? Make sure to check out 14. It's like the best storyline I've ever tried. But what they're really trying to summarize is they're trying to say that the narrative, the music, and basically the whole environment, the wholesome community and everything falls into place very nicely to deliver you this entire package and experience that we know as the 14 MSQ experience, which is one of a kind in the MMORPG industry. And I 100% recognize that there are single player titles out there with really good storylines as well. But keep in mind they're working within the confines of the MMORPG space. There's certain structures, like I said, classes, jobs, leveling processes that other single player titles don't have to deal with. So pacing is also at the mercy of those things I've mentioned. But you know what? At the end of the day, this is a very interesting topic to me because I've always tried to ponder and think about why is it that 14's MSQ is something so special that even after the MSQs have ended, people talk about it on a daily basis. They draw characters, they draw fan art of the characters that they feel emotionally bonded to. People flock back to the game whenever there's new MSQs. People continue to talk about...
Or when you don't have any talent like I do, you just name your two Palicos, Grahatia and Y'shtola. It's something.
about certain pivotal moments in the MSQs and why this character have done this, why certain interpretations are like that. It's a very strange phenomenon, but above are basically my reasons why I think this is such a special case. And I'll be very curious to know what your answer is as well. Like, what is so special about the MSQs that keeps you coming back to do the MSQs? Let me know in the comments below, I'm eager to hear your thoughts. With that said, a very quick reminder, 12 hours from the publication of this video, I'll be live on the official Final Fantasy XIV channels to discuss patch 6.3 on the community live stream. Feel free to tag along for the fun ride if you can make it in your time zone, but if not, I'll probably see you in the next video. Make sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already joined this happy family. I'll keep you posted on everything Final Fantasy XIV. I do stream on Twitch, feel free to swing by to say hello. Last but not least, big thank you to my Patreon subscribers. Thank you so much for the support, everyone. I'll see you soon.
This might...
Damn. The endings on these videos are so sudden. It's like I can't even like pause it at the right time. But yeah, this is a great video by Quazii. I agree. It's definitely about the time that you take to go through the MSQ, which is why I always reinforce how important it is to take your time, appreciate every single bit of storytelling, because it all kind of just like builds up on top of each other. So I don't know if maybe this person kind of like blazed through it maybe a little bit too fast, or maybe it just didn't work for them. But I think it is important to have these discussions. I don't think, because I can imagine like what the replies to this was like. I can imagine, because like sometimes outside of the game, the community can get it can get a little bit antagonistic. But it's like, oh, look at Rui trying to imply someone played the game wrong. There it is! There it is! No, it's like, but you guys get what I'm saying. You guys get what I'm saying. It's like, I think it's nice to have these discussions of when, you know, when people bring up flaws, potential flaws that the game might have. It's like, I don't really agree with some of the stuff that he is saying here. But I think that it's fine if he has that opinion, because the story is not going to work for everyone. And as we've seen, the ending of Endwalker, for those of you who finished the game, I'm not going to spoil it, but the ending of Endwalker definitely had a lot of people divided about some of the choices that some of the dialogue choices that you had at the end. Didn't work for everyone. For me, I was like, yeah, this is fine. This is happening. Let's fucking go. Let's fucking do it. But for a lot of people, it didn't work out. But I think that that's okay. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think that the journey that you go through up until you get to that point, even if you don't appreciate that specific moment, I think that there's still a lot of really key moments that are very, very special. And to me, it still remains like the best story. And here's the thing. It's not even like the best story in MMOs, the best story in video games. It's the best story ever. And in any form, like movies or, you know, books, all of this stuff, I like it that much. And it's okay if a lot of people don't agree with me. I don't care. Because to me, it is. And it is basically about the interaction with the characters. It's about the moments that you have with these characters. It's just that simple. And this is not even me saying like that this is the best story for an MMO, because I don't even know if this story is amazing in an MMO setting almost, because it's kind of weird. But like, I wish that you could have other people in your story, if that makes sense. Like actually have other players play out some of the scenarios with you. I think that would actually be cool. This is something that Guild Wars 2 actually does a little bit better than 14. And that is not how they tell their story, but it is the fact that even if I'm doing my personal story, friends of mine can be in that personal story with me, and they even show up during the cutscene, standing next to my character with their gear. This is something that I really appreciate about Guild Wars 2 that I kind of feel like Final Fantasy XIV could learn, which is like, yeah, there's a story, and it would be cool if you could have somebody else with you there. And, you know, some people might say, oh, but there's balancing issues there because, you know, then the mobs are going to be weaker. There's going to be another player there with you. And for starters, you can sink the other player down. This is already done in dungeons. There's no reason why this couldn't be done in scenarios. Certain scenarios, as a matter of fact, also sink your player character down. So you can sink the player down in terms of power levels. On top of it, you can make the mobs slightly harder. But even on top of that, let's be completely honest, the MSQ is easy as shit. It's so fucking easy. It's like it's a joke. Come on. You're not gonna sway me with like, oh, but the balance of the MSQ, and I'm just like, bruh, come on. What balance? You can be a paladin and fast blade your way through like 99% of the MSQ. Just spam fast blade and kill everything with fast blade, or do the AOE one, whatever it is. One AOE, not even like the combo of the two AOEs, just do one of them, and you can clear 99% of the MSQ. So yeah, it's like I don't think that balancing and whatnot would be an excuse. I think that would be something that would actually elevate the story to another level. Like, say for instance, I convince a friend of mine to play through the game, and I can actually join him while he is doing his scenarios. And maybe if you join him while he's doing his scenarios, maybe you get, I don't know, poetics, because like poetics are so easy to get anyways that who cares if you get more poetics. Or maybe you get to choose. You'll be like, oh, you can choose to get poetics, or you can choose to get like Grand Company seals, or you can choose to get some other meaning like PvP currency. You'll be like, hey, you're helping a friend out doing this quest. What reward do you want? You want poetics? You want PvP stuff? You want... And there would even be a reason for you to help out your friends doing this stuff. It'd be really cool. Do I hear a Paladin rant? What are you talking about? I'm not ranting about Paladin. Are there problems with the time travel and other stuff you dig deep? Sure, but nothing that would ruin it. Yeah, there's nothing that would actually ruin it. Yeah, I agree. The reason I play on release past 2 Xbox because I want to experience the story together with friends too. Yeah, but that's the thing, right? You're experiencing the story together, but you're not really together like in a party playing the game. Like you are playing the game and your friends are playing the game separately and all of that. But, you know, at the end of the day, my opinion doesn't change. But I'm perfectly fine with people having the discussion. I think that's fine. I think that's cool.